There's a very high possibility. I don't know if we can pierce it as well. Like, can I pierce with? Okay, whatever we're doing looks freaking sick. Holy shit, dude. This looks crazy. Wait. Yo, guys, what is up? Max on our Path of Exile 2 video, and today we're going over my cast on freeze Ice Shot Deadeye. Now, Ice Shot got buffed yesterday. They buffed the area that it hits in. They buffed the amount of projectiles that it fires. They fixed some of its freeze interactions and changed the way that the projectiles work. And overall, it is now a much more competent skill. It is incredibly powerful for AoE clear, and it excels at that. It definitely suffers compared to like our lightning arrow, lightning rod setup in terms of single target DPS, but we'll talk about that later in the video and some workarounds for that. And this is a setup that I put together literally like in a few hours on stream, so there's a ton of things that we can do to improve it, and I haven't invested much currency into the build yet, but I wanted to show off what I'm working with because it's a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. Let's get right into it. So we're going to start with just a little like map demonstration. This is a T15 map that I grabbed that has a bunch of stuff, but mainly it has a breach, so we should see a bunch of enemy density. And this is a build that we kind of just put together real quick yesterday. It is very, very cool, very satisfying. We'll talk about some of the single target stuff in a second, but I just kind of wanted to show you guys what it looks like. And that is that we've got ricocheting bow cold explosions literally going everywhere. We are actually clearing faster than we were doing on our ball lightning build with lightning arrow, but we don't have the same amount of single target. So this is what I wanted to show you. So we found a breach, so hopefully we can see some like real proper mob density in this breach. Let's do it. Just explode everything. Nice class. And see ya. And once again, this is like T15 on quite scuffed setup. And we're already like doing this amount of crazy stuff. And this is all because Ice Shot got like crazy buff today. I guess technically yesterday at the time that you're watching this. Grab all of that. Kill that elite. All right, there is our breach. So now let's talk about like what we're using to deal so much damage and all the explosions and all the ice. And the first thing to talk about is actually a interesting ring that I'm using that is called the Call of the Brotherhood ring. Now this converts 100% of our lightning damage to cold damage. And one of the big issues with Ice Shot that I've mentioned like a little bit ago is that Ice Shot, you know, shoots out a bunch of projectiles, but we don't have like a crazy interaction like we did with like lightning arrow and lightning rods to deal a bunch of single target damage. And so what this item does, the Call of the Brotherhood, is I'm basically just using my lightning arrow setup, but I've swapped lightning arrow for Ice Shot, but to substitute the amount of single target damage that we're losing out on. This Call of the Brotherhood allows us to still use our like cast on shock kind of ball lightning setup, but now all of this damage is cold damage and all of it's freezing, and then instead of scaling lightning damage, we can just deal cold damage as well. And so that's kind of part of what we're doing for like a single target. I'm on like a pretty budget setup right now, so I'm not using like a cast on freeze with ball right now because I only have 3 links. But that is something that we could add. But basically, you're going to be using our ice shot to shoot most things. And then anytime there's an elite or a boss or a rare, well, we can still use the ball lightning rod combo. But now it's dealing cold damage. Now it's freezing. And it's going to be proccing a bunch of our freeze stuff instead. And so that's kind of what we're doing for single target. Now for actual skills and stuff like that, let's talk about the main thing first, and that is our ice shot. I only have ice shot right now on a 5 link. 6 links are really expensive, and I do not have a lot of currency. But on ice shot, we're using primal armament. This makes us deal more weapon elemental damage. We've got martial tempo for more attack speed. We're also using cold infusion for more cold damage. And we've got ricochet. This is something that just got buffed. It allows our skills to have a chance to chain from terrain. And that actually works really well with ice shot. There's other choices that we could use here, but on indoor maps or maps where there's like, any bit of terrain, this allows ice shot to kind of supplement some of its weaker single target damage, because those projectiles that we're shooting can now hit enemies multiple times. And while this only says we have a 40% chance with our actual setup, we're sitting at about, I think, 60% chance for these to ricochet. And so 60% of the time, all of these projectiles are going to be coming back and hitting multiple times, which drastically increases our damage on this. Now, I do think on a high budget version of this build, you'd actually want to go for a lot of crit stuff. I think scaling ice shot with crit would be really strong. I just don't really have like the currency to fully set that up, but it's something I'm going to be working towards. Now, for the rest of the things that we're using, it's really important to use Herald of Ice with this build. We are going to be freezing a ton with Ice Shot. We've got a bunch of freeze buildup. We're doing a bunch of cold. And so with Herald of Ice, whenever this is active, which is all the time, whenever we shatter an enemy, with an attack, it causes an icy explosion. This is partly what's proccing all of the massive novas. Now, you'll see that we didn't have any ice support on like ice shot for freezing, but that's because we're using those like freeze stuff on Herald of Ice. On Herald of Ice, we've got glaciation for 50% more freeze buildup. We've got magnified effect for more area, and ice bite for whenever this kills enemies, we're going to get even more cold damage. And basically what Herald is doing is it's causing these big ice explosions that are freezing enemies that we're not hitting. And then with those freezes, we're actually using a cast on freeze setup. Now, there's a lot of interesting things that we could put into cast on freeze. I was getting a lot of suggestions. We did this whole build live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Moxie, if you ever want to come check it out. But what we ended up using is Frost Wall. There's some cool things that you could use, like Eye of Winter for like crit weakness. Comet would not be very good for this build. Live was getting a lot of suggestions for Comet. The reason we're not using Comet is because Comet does a bunch of spell damage, and it freezes, but we're not scaling spell damage. We want things to be coming out of cast on freeze that is implementing and increasing our damage. So originally I was using Freezing Mark, and once I get more sets or like things on cast on freeze, we would put Freezing Mark in here. But Frostwall does a lot of interesting things for this build. First off, it does a bunch of cold damage, but it also creates a really large explosion that we're basically instantly detonating, sending out even more freeze stuff and causing even more explosions. And we can like hit our projectiles on the frost walls, which is really cool with Fortress support. So we've got cast on freeze with Fortress and frost walls, and then we're also using impetus so that this is proccing more often. I don't know what about this setup is making this proc so often, but it seems to be proccing a lot more than our cast on shock. I think mainly because we're just freezing like really, really quickly on this specific setup. We've got 2 marks set up, or 1 curse, 1 mark. Freezing Mark is a spell that is going to make enemies have more freeze buildup on them, and then when they do get frozen, they're going to explode. I've got this with Biting Frost so that it can't actually build freeze buildup, but that's only for the Nova. That's not actually for the mark. The explosion can't cause freeze buildup, but it does 50% more damage on frozen enemies. And then Cold Pen, so it does a bunch more cold penetration. Once again, don't have these, like this is a little scuff setup. I've just got them on 2 links right now. With Hypothermia, we've got this is a cold shred. Cursed enemies have less cold resistance. Only cast this on like bosses or rares. And then we've got Heightened Curse for even more cold res shred and persistence so that it stays on them for longer. These two things could both get technically automated into like a 6-link cast on freeze, which would be really cool. Just don't have that set up. And then we've also got Ball Lightning. This is what we're casting for our big damage with Lightning Rod. Ball Lightning, still the same setup as before. We're using Wild Shards, Unleash, and Deceleration. We want these orbs to be procking all of our Lightning Rods, and we can get these like kind of big chains on them to proc all those Lightning Rods and deal all that cold damage on Lightning Rod. This is like our single target skill. We've got Heft for more max fizz scatter shot so that we can proc more rods on the ground, concentrated effect for more area damage, and elemental focus. We don't actually really care about Lightning Rod freezing. We just want it to deal as much damage as possible. So I've got elemental focus on this as well. And once again, I'm still messing around with a lot of these things, but I just wanted to show you our basic setup. And then I still got to do some things with freezing salvo. Right now, this is a skill that I've got on a cooldown that we can do to do a bunch of freeze buildup and a bunch of damage. We've got Hourglass. This skill inherently has to build up a missile every like 0.81 seconds. It accumulates 12 additional missiles. So you're not even going to be clicking this until like every 10 seconds. So having Hourglass for a 10-second cooldown on it is actually pretty great. And then I've got Cold Exposure so that when this does crit, if it does crit, it'll proc Cold Exposure and make enemies take more cold damage from us. And then the very last thing is Wind Dancer. We've got a bunch of extra spirit left. So I've got Precision for more accuracy, Cannibalism for life recovery on kill, and Clarity for mana regen. All of these things are super nice. Precision is probably the least important. Cannibalism and Clarity really make the build feel a lot better. So the skill tree, once again, still things I'm messing around with, but it's very reminiscent of our Lightning Arrow. We obviously removed some of the lightning stuff in to get like more freeze and cold damage. So we're still going down this left side, still grabbing this like 140 evasion over here. We grabbed Emboldened Avatar for more freeze buildup, which is really nice. We grabbed pressure points for more freeze buildup and stun. We did unspec out of Forces of Nature, just temporarily. I think that's something that we might pick up later. We've got pressure points, acceleration for more movement speed and skill speed, feathered fletching for like a ton of damage as long as we have projectile speed. I don't think our arrow benefits as much from Pierce, so I'm not going into Pierce the Heart right now. That's hasn't really noticed not having that point at the moment. We did just kind of for the memes. It's pretty cool though. Go for Trick Shot. This gives us a 15% chance to chain from for terrain. This gives us 5, so we go from that like 40% to 60%. So now our arrows are just going to be going everywhere. We still have a bunch of attack speed, evasion, acrobatics. Coming Calamity is going to give us 50% increased cold damage, which is a must. Got a Jewel here with attack speed, damage with bows, and increased damage with hits against uniques. We grabbed Storm Swell for 15% cold pen, mental toughness for reduced cost of our skills while we're on low mana, or while we're not on low mana, which is awesome because we're going to be consuming a lot of mana on this build. We've got Snowpiercer for more cold pen plus intelligence, and then we pathed up to grab Essence of the Mountain. This is a huge pickup. It's 20% increased freeze buildup, and we get 5% of our damage as extra cold damage, which is massive. With some extra points, I do plan on grabbing this Blinding Strikes for 24% more attack damage and a chance to blind with our attacks, which should be pretty nice. And that is our current setup. For Ascendancy points, I did finally get my 4th point, so we have Endless Munitions for additional projectiles. I've got Far Shot on at the moment, and then we've got Wind Ward and Gathering Winds. Now for gear, there's two like really cool unique rings. I would like to eventually incorporate both of them, I think. But I've got to like fix some of my resistances. But the Call of the Brotherhood increases or changes all of our lightning damage to cold damage, which is really cool for the build. However, it does definitely have downsides. One of the big downsides is that we can't apply shock. Shock is a pretty big multiplier for us. And so right now when I take this off, I just deal way less damage. But it would be nice to grab a source of shock, something I'm still working on. And the other ring that's really nice is the Pulsar Keln ring. This basically gives us the ability to shatter enemies that are chilled as if they were frozen, which can be pretty nice for clear. I'm currently not using this on the build because we're just freezing things so quickly that I'm not really having to notice the like chill stuff. But with like, there's a thing where you can like shatter enemies to deal way more damage against them, and that might be a 6 length, and that could warrant using the Pulsar Keln. ring, but at the moment, just not super important. I'd rather use this Call of the Brotherhood. For gear, my gear actually hasn't changed basically at all. Besides that ring from our lightning arrow build, I'm still using the exact same bow with increased fizz, added cold, plus level of projectiles, and bow attacks for an additional arrow. It's actually technically, I think, fine to get lightning damage on this because we are going to be converting lightning to cold, but you're really looking for high fizz damage. I can check this bow real quick. This is a 320 DPS bow. People were asking me how I'm using this overlay. This is a thing that you can use on PC. It's called PoE Overlay 2. It's like a kind of like a plugin / extension that you can download at your own risk. But it is what I'm using to like check our like DPS and things like that. For my gloves, I've got added fizz, cold, max life, attack speed, cold res, chaos res. Pretty great gloves. On my rings, I've got fizz, cold, lightning, Ellie resist, fire, cold res. Chest piece, just a bunch of evasion and resistances. Belts, a bunch of life and evasion and resistances. Same with the boots, just max life, dexterity, and reses. The quiver has added lightning, added fizz, projectile speed, attack speed, and lots of pierce. This all feels really great. The percent attack speed or projectile speed is with our current setup is literally just 39% increased damage. So getting projectile speed feels really good on this setup. My helmet, I've got +1 minion skills, which you can completely ignore. I've just got lightning, chaos, a bunch of life, and a bunch of evasion. And then my amulet that is allowing me to use like all of these different spirit reservations and all of these auras is a solar amulet. Solar has the implicit for plus to spirit. So you can go for one of these and then you can roll spirit on them. So I've got a 5% increased max life, spirit, strength, all Ellie res and fire res, which turns out to be pretty nice, and some extra accuracy. I've got a very cheap anoint on this for siphon, but for like a more expensive anoint, there's a ton of different cold things that we could anoint. We could anoint things like all the way up here, like inescapable cold for 40% increased freeze buildup and freeze duration on enemies. There's a bunch of cool things that we could anoint, but I'm not quite at like an amulet level that I'd want to invest like multiple like divines into an anoint yet. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Just for a quick summary, I do think that this build currently is not as strong as our lightning arrow, lightning rod, ball lightning setup. And if you are like kind of getting through maps, I would still play that build unless you're looking to switch it up. But if you are looking to switch it up, I'm still going to be updating that like lightning build. I just wanted to like try something different because this just got buffed and it seemed interesting, and I like making builds. So don't worry, still be doing like lightning stuff. But this build is really cool. It's really satisfying, and on a pretty budget setup, it's very strong. I think this build will only get stronger and stronger when we get more currency to invest into it, and eventually maybe swap it into a full crit build. I think crit has some really powerful synergies with ice skills, and so I think that's definitely the route that we're going to go. But if you're just kind of like getting through maps right now, I would still recommend sticking with the like ball, lightning arrow, lightning rod. That is just a really, really strong synergy. And this like does need a unique that's basically a divine to get it really going. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you got any thoughts to improve the build or things that you would add to it because, still working on it. But yeah, I'll catch you on the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.